I think I can speak for everyone when I say that 2020 has been the most unpredictable and overall strangest year in recent memory, and the effect of it couldn't have been more prevalent than in the amusement industry. You had parks closing down for months, many of them haven't even opened yet. New rides were pushed back, unprecedented policies were put in place, but to some of us like myself, the COVID protocols didn't really matter a whole ton because we hardly made it to any parks. In 2020, I got a grand total of 2 new credits, both at Adventure Park USA, and neither of which cracked my top 25 coasters, not even close. But all this time off from coasters has given me the opportunity to sit and think about my experiences and develop more thoughts on roller coasters I have ridden, and my top 25 has actually shifted around a good bit from where it was last year. So as this treacherous year is wrapping up, I'm here to give you my official 2020 top 25 roller coasters that I've personally ridden, and if you're curious, this is out of 81 credits. So kicking off the list at number 25 is Batman the Ride at Six Flags St. Louis. This is my first Batman clone and to this point the only one that I have ridden, although I'm hoping to change that soon. It cannot be overstated how whippy those corkscrews are. The pacing is absolutely incredible as it just flies through that layout, or at least it did when I rode it. Really my only gripe is that the layout felt a bit bland and uninspired, just very typical for a B&M looper, although I must admit that that's for a reason as the elements hit nonetheless. Coming in, number 24 is Hungarian Horntail, aka Blue Side of the defunct Dragon Challenge at Universal's Islands of Adventure. This was the only side of Dragon Challenge that was open while I was at the park, and despite being a bit overhyped, Hungarian Horntail was all around just a solid ride. It definitely wasn't perfect and it had its fair share of headbanging, but it was undeniably intense, and even though it no longer dueled, you still had some great interaction with the other track weaving in and out, creating some awesome near misses. At 23 is a coaster that doesn't produce the greatest thrills, but it has so much more. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom. The spectacle that this ride creates is simply stunning, and sure, there aren't a ton of forces, but if that's what you really want, there's actually some decent airtime here and there in the back row. Combine that with an insanely long ride experience and stunning western theming and atmosphere that it creates, and Big Thunder Mountain is a masterpiece of a family coaster. Moving into the 22 spot, we have American Eagle at Six Flags Great America, specifically the red side because that was the side that was open when I was there. Man, this was a ride that I just did not see coming. Despite knowing that I had limited time at the park, I decided to hop in line because I had been hearing RMC rumors and how this was my mom's favorite coaster as a kid. I wasn't expecting a whole lot from the ride experience, and I remember looking at a POV on the way to the park and thinking how mediocre it looked. That thing shut me up quick. Not only did it have airtime, but every single hill had it, and it was far more powerful than I had ever imagined. I mean, watch it take this dip out of the massive Rose Bowl. On camera, it just looks like a boring little exit, but we're heading into some bigger and better elements. But no, going over that dip, I got some of the strongest ejector airtime I've probably experienced on any one coaster. And overall, I rode in the front, so it was probably much smoother than the back, but I felt like aside from the turn at the end, the roughness is massively overstated. At number 21, I have VALRAVN, and this is definitely one of the more controversial picks of the video. I'll be the first to admit that VALRAVN doesn't really have any forces, but it finds a multitude of ways to make up for it. I know a lot of people call it a gimmick, but sitting in the front row, there's really nothing like hanging over that drop 223 feet up high over Cedar Point and Lake Erie, just waiting for that moment that you're going to plummet to the ground. And then you go into the layout that's just pure fun. You get some incredible hang time, but the ride does not feel slow like how it might look in the POV. This is also one of the most re-rideable coasters out there. When I was at Cedar Point, everything except for the big four were walk-ons because of rain being in the forecast, and the one coaster that I decided to marathon was VALRAVN because of how enjoyable it was. At number 20, I have the second and last Disney mine train of the video, Expedition Everest at Disney's Animal Kingdom. Basically everything I said about Big Thunder Mountain applies to Expedition Everest, but on a larger scale. It has everything Big Thunder has, but I think the theming is more impressive. The structure is mind-boggling to stand in front of and look at in real life. I mean, it's only a little over 100 feet shorter than the actual highest natural point in the entire state of Florida. Just like Big Thunder, it's a long ride, and during that ride, it actually provides some good thrills. The high points include a backward section and a relatively steep 80-foot drop following the Yeti scene that you don't see coming. At number 19, I have the Wild One at Six Flags America. And wow, this thing is true to its name. I'm just gonna say it, Wild One has by far the best laterals I've experienced on any coaster, and it's not even remotely close. During its run of airtime hills, a few of them turn sharply halfway through, slamming you into the side of the train. If you're not expecting them, it could hurt a little bit, but if you're ready, you just get those pure laterals, no pain. But those don't even come close to matching the Helix finale that objectively might be the best Helix on the planet. because usually helixes are more dull spots and take place after the ride has lost all its speed, but on the wild one you absolutely rip through it. And look at this, it's hardly even banked at all. You also have some great floaters to project your airtime, one of the hills even being combined with their structure of their old defunct Skull Mountain water coaster to create an awesome head chopper. It does all this while remaining smooth as long as you ride towards the front, yet still keeping the feel of a classic wooden coaster. Number 18, Batwing, Six Flags America. Is this the best Vekoma in the United States? At least until Tron gets built, I think so. Call me crazy, but I think that the vertical loop is basically just as good as the pretzel loop on those Superman Ultimate Flight clones, but Batwing has something that those Ultimate Flight clones just don't have, and that's a consistently good and intense experience from start to finish. The Ultimate Flight clones have that awesome pretzel loop, but then just kind of peter out and die, but Batwing hits that vertical loop, then has 2 straight intense turns, followed by an extremely disorientating double inline twist that'll have your mind all over the place, and then a helix taken with a ton of speed that gets worryingly close to the ground, especially considering that's not even a custom layout and wasn't meant for this terrain. I mean, just look at those footers.
It's beautiful!
Number 17, Fahrenheit at Hersheypark. Fahrenheit is just one of those coasters where I feel like every element works and hits on exactly what it's supposed to do. And you also get a ride with a variety of strong forces. If Fahrenheit was at virtually any other park, I feel like it'd get way more recognition for the things that it does. I've heard a good number of people recently say how they thought Fahrenheit was a bit rough, but that wasn't my experience at all. I personally didn't feel a hint of anything resembling roughness, and if I did, I would have felt it considering all the rides I had were back in 2015 and 16 when it had the rock hard over the shoulder restraints. Just a great ride in pretty much every category in my opinion. At 16, I have MAGNUM XL200. I know a number of you are going to see this as far too low placement, but I think it just comes down to what you like in coasters. The airtime in the second half was some of the most abrupt I've felt in my life, but it wasn't very sustained, and I prefer more sustained airtime like you might find on an Intamin or B&M Hyper. And also the first half of the layout didn't really do a whole lot for me, other than the first drop, which you crest over so slowly that if you're in the front, almost feels like a bit of a dive coaster, oddly enough. So sure, I definitely don't think that's a perfect ride, but that setting is perfect, and the airtime with that tiny lap bar is so powerful that it still deserves a spot this high. Number 15, American Thunder. I should first mention that I've been hearing reports that American Thunder has been running terribly this year, but I didn't ride it this year. I rode it last year when it was running great, so this spot is based on my experience. American Thunder is my first new school GCI, so I had to see what all the fuss was about, and I have to say that I was quite impressed. The ride was quite smooth while maintaining that feel of a wooden coaster. The trains were awesome as I felt like you were sitting on a sofa, and I personally didn't have my restraint come down at all during the ride. I have heard many people say that happens, but not for me. Maybe I was just lucky. And if you want a nice quantity of airtime, American Thunder has it. My favorite part was a series of 4 straight speed hills taken at a rapid pace, and you could barely get back in your seat before you were sent skyward again and again. I cannot wait to get on more of these newer GCIs. At 14, I have another coaster from Six Flags St. Louis, Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast, the uber intense classic Premier Ride shuttle coaster. This thing, just wow, it blew my expectations out of the water. Mr. Freeze has a similar acceleration to Joker's Drinks at my home park, and I usually find the one on Joker to be just alright, so I was expecting the one on Mr. Freeze to be just alright. Nah bro, maybe it was just that we were going backwards, but that launch threw me forward into my restraint with a punch to the gut in the best way possible. Then you go back to back in possibly the 2 most intense elements I've ever experienced on a coaster. First, an inverted top hat that I actually never even knew was inverted until I got to the park and saw it. Then an overbank turn that, just like the one on Millennium Force, doesn't look like a whole lot on camera, but oh boy it is. And then that's followed by a vertical spike that decides to hang you there for a few seconds, letting you pause to think about your life choices before doing all again forwards. Really my only complaint about the ride other than the length is that I ended up coming off with a headache from the intensity because of how it was actually kinda rough. I'm really glad that they got rid of those over the shoulder restraints a while back. Number 13, Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America. I know you've probably heard this before, but oh man that first drop. If I had to compare this first drop to anything, it actually wouldn't be anything on another coaster. I'd have to say that feels almost like one of those Dropbox water slides because you start down that pre-drop and then it feels like you have the floor drop out from under you. And that airtime is sustained. You're still high out of your seat by the time you bottom out and only come back down when you start heading back upwards. Overall, this might come as a bit of a surprise to you, but I really did not feel like Raging Bull was lacking in airtime. Going in, I was thinking that I would get off and immediately want to run back over to American Eagle because I was missing my airtime. But no, it was completely satisfying. I think that's because every moment that does have provides strong sustained airtime, and none of it fails to hit. Maybe that's because Raging Bull has a 9-row train as opposed to the usual 7 or 8 on a B&M Hyper, but the Camelback had sustained floater, the wave turn-like thing had good sustained floater, the drop off the mid-course had sustained ejector, yes, ejector, the hill following that had sustained flejector, and the dip following that had some good ejector. Also, I have to give a shout out to the Raging Bull crew because they were on their game. 3 train operations, 30 to 40 second dispatches, and it turned a full queue into a 20-minute wait. The best operations I've ever witnessed. At number 12, I have Boss, the third coaster from Six Flags St. Louis in the last 4 spots. Yeah, their top 3 are pretty much interchangeable, and make it so that if Six Flags St. Louis just fix up all the other aspects other than the rides, it could be a middle to upper tier Six Flags park. But about Boss, I'm just gonna go out and say that this is by far the roughest coaster I've ever ridden, and it's not close. But if I'm being honest, that really didn't take away from the ride experience for me. I don't think that it would have felt nearly as intense or draining as it did without the roughness. This has to be one of the most intense wooden coasters out there. Something else I feel like I need to mention is the incredible airtime. Pretty much the first through 4th drops all feel like you're falling off the face of the earth. Sure, maybe they're exaggerated because of the poor pacing, you slow down to really doing nothing between each hill, but then when you do get into the action, it's amazing. And those first 4 hills are really what puts it this high. They are absolutely mental. Number 11, Stormrunner at Hersheypark. I should first probably mention that the last time I rode this, it still had the hard over the shoulder restraints, and I'll say that that launch sure was forceful, but it was not exactly the most pleasant experience. If I rode it again, which I hopefully will soon, it could definitely move up in our rankings. But what I love about Stormrunner is that it doesn't just end at the launch. You have a few more following elements that you might be able to argue are just as good. First, the top hat that serves as the main drop of the ride and provides some incredible airtime towards the back of the train. Then you have the Cobra Loop followed by the spectacular flying snake dive. They sure do love their one-of-a-kind snake-themed inversions, even though snakes have absolutely nothing to do with this ride or the park. Again, I just need to get a few more re-rides on Stormrunner to develop some more up-to-date thoughts. At number 10, I have Great Bear, also at Hersheypark. This analysis might sound a bit weird and not make much sense, and I don't really know how to phrase it, but I feel like the layout of Great Bear just flows so nicely. This coaster is slick, both literally and figuratively. It's one of the smoothest coasters I've ever ridden, unlike some other 90s B&M invert, and it transitions from inversion to inversion flawlessly. I also love how it utilizes the terrain perfectly, weaving in and around Skyrush, Comet, and Super Duper Looper. Seeing how Hersheypark can so smoothly fit their rides in, it makes me curious whether they could actually fit in a Giga Coaster that weaves around the park, in and around rides, but that's probably a pipe dream. Number 9, Incredible Hulk at Universal's Islands of Adventure. Pure intensity non-stop from launch until mid-course. Of course, we all know Hulk's famous first element, or I guess you could consider it 2 elements, the launch and a 0G roll. It's crazy to me to think that this launch is only 40 miles per hour because it feels like you're just relaxing, going up the lift, and then out of nowhere you bolt to the speed of light. Maybe it's just the effects and the fact that you're going upwards that make it feel faster than it is. Then of course you have that 0G roll, one of the whippiest and most out of this world inversions I've ever experienced. Now that I think about it, it is probably my second favorite inversion after the dog tongue on Max Force. Another thing you always hear about though is that mid-course, but personally I think that the effects of it are overstated. It's right towards the end of the ride, so it's not really inhibiting any big elements from being what they can be, and it makes it so that the corkscrew provides some awesome hang time, a force that you don't really find on any of the other elements. At number 8, I have maybe a surprise pick for some of you, and that's Swamp Fox at Family Kingdom. Man, Swamp Fox packs so much despite being just 72 feet tall. Every single hill is shaped just perfectly to give maximum levels of PTC Buzzbar ejector airtime. Yep, you heard me, ejector airtime. I mean, just watch the slow motion video of the people in front of the cameraman flying up and out of their seat continuously. And then right after that, you hit a turn that is not banked at all. Some people might find that uncomfortable, but I absolutely love it. I should also mention that you don't only get airtime on the airtime moments, it's a classic woody and isn't the smoothest thing in the world, so any second, you could go over a random bump and get airtime at the most unexpected moment. I'd actually say that the 3.5 hour detour from Carowinds might be worth it just for Swamp Fox. Number 7, another maybe controversial pick, but I have Maverick at Cedar Point. Alright, so I thought the layout to this ride was absolutely amazing. It packs literally every force imaginable, including some ejector airtime, keeps its speed extremely well, it's a smooth ride. I can't really fault the layout other than maybe a few dead spots here and there. The issue I had though was the same as most people that don't rank it that high, and that's the restraints. The whole time I was having a hard time actually focusing on the ride because I just had those shoulder pads digging into my shoulders and collarbone. It could have been maybe that I was a lot shorter at the time than I am now. I was 5'3" then, now I'm 5'11", so maybe the restraints weren't fitting on me like they do with most people. But also the lap bar portion, I felt like really restricted any actual feeling of airtime, which is weird because I never had that problem on Fahrenheit, so maybe I just need a rewrite. But in the end, the layout is just so amazing that I cannot rank it lower than number 7. And number 6, I have Goliath at Six Flags Great America. I know how most people always look at a POV of Goliath and talk about how short it is, but to be honest, it didn't really feel like that short of a ride when I was on there. Sure, if the ride was longer that would be great, but I came off satisfied, and in my eyes that's what matters. I'm also convinced now that this has to be the smoothest wooden coaster in the world. It didn't feel wooden at all. It felt like a brand new steel coaster with little to no imperfections. Now of course some people will argue that it is actually a steel coaster, but I view it as a wooden coaster. You also can't talk about Goliath without bringing up the forces/sensations. The drop-in speed hill might be the only 2 real airtime moments, but they're some of the strongest airtime moments I've experienced. There's also of course that absolutely insane hang time on the back-to-back dive loop and 0G stall. Number 5, if you've been watching this channel for a little bit, you know that I'm a fanboy of this ride. Superman Ride is still at Six Flags America. I just cannot believe how insanely underrated this ride is. People tend to focus on the 4 seconds of straight track, and the helixes, which are actually pretty forceful. Like, why is Ride still known as the king of straight track? Look at Titan Max, look at Wild Thing, I mean Ring Racer. Yet Superman's 4 seconds make the straight track king? This is racism against Six Flags America. Alright, no, but aside from that, Superman Ride still has the strongest airtime I've experienced on any roller coaster. You of course have the insane 3-hill finale, but my favorite hill is actually the second camelback that splits the 2 helixes. You see, you take this hill right after that straight section, so you kinda relaxed, but then you thrust into this pull-up that is extremely tight, pulling some awesome positive Gs. Then you're immediately launched straight from those positive Gs into negative Gs and some of the strongest, most sustained ejector airtime out there. It feels as if you're in a catapult. Well, I don't know if I can say that because I'm not in the circus. I've never been on a catapult, but I imagine this is what it feels like. Along with that airtime, you have some crazy good positive Gs. Like I mentioned, the helixes, though primarily the first one, are pretty intense. You can start grading out towards the end of them. But the most intense moment of the ride really goes under the radar, and that's a turn following the drop. I don't think people realize that this is a complete 90-degree turn, directly following the drop, when you still have all of that 73 miles per hour. It's like a mini I-305 blackout turn, except it doesn't turn upwards to relieve some of the intensity. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk on why Superman Ride of Steel is elite. Number 4, Top Thrill Dragster. There's not really a whole lot to say that hasn't been said before. Crazy launch, 0 to 120 miles per hour. I'm not sure there's another place other than Six Flags Great Adventure or Ferrari World where you can travel at speeds of 120 miles per hour while being so exposed. Of course, that top hat is awesome too, but one of the things that I think goes under the radar is the journey up the top hat. You are climbing 400 feet in the air, vertically, while being held in by just a little T-bar. I don't know, something about that is just so special to me. Kicking off the top 3, we have yet another surprise pick, Max Force at Six Flags Great America. If you want more in-depth thoughts, I have a full video dedicated to the pros and cons, but mostly pros of Max Force. But briefly, you obviously have that launch as the quickest accelerating one in North America. Personally, I think it's the most forceful launch I've experienced. Yes, more forceful than Top Thrill Dragster's, although I still prefer Dragster's launch because of the overall experience. But I argue that the rest of Max Force's layout is even better than the launch. You have that one-of-a-kind dog tongue element that provides some insane positive Gs, pulling up and out of the element, and an insane hang time while in it. Then one of the whippiest inversions on the planet, and then you cap it off with a double inversion, once again providing awesome hang time. Sure, it's not the longest ride, but I don't think it really matters because there are 0 dead spots and every element delivers other than maybe the speed hill. It's also probably the smoothest coaster I've ever ridden. It has some of the best restraints and overall is a masterpiece from S&S given the land they had to work with. Number 2, Millennium Force Cedar Point. I know guys, I'm totally still living in the year 2000. Millennium Force at number 2? He must be crazy. Well, actually, believe it or not, I have my own opinion, as shown by this list. I have Millennium Force this high because in my eyes, it excels at pretty much every single category. It's nearing the realm of a perfect roller coaster. It has an awesome drop, awesome setting, some positive Gs, some good airtime, a cool soundtrack, crazy good pacing, it's smooth, it has great restraints, and it's comfortable. I really can't find anything bad about it. It's one of the most well-rounded, if not the most well-rounded coaster out there, and it's just flat out fun and an enjoyable experience, so I see it as the second best roller coaster I've personally ridden. And finally, at number 1, the most basic number 1 in history, Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Yeah, you're probably screaming at me about how unoriginal Steel Vengeance at number 1 is, but have you ever thought that there might be a reason for that? 27. That's how many seconds of airtime Steel Vengeance has. And this isn't just like, yay, I'm floating around in my seat. This is hardcore at minimum flejector, but for a majority of the ride, ejector airtime. It also has one of the most jam-packed layouts out there. Once you detach from the old ear raper, you better be ready because you're barely going to be able to get a breath in before you hit those brakes, a full 80 seconds later. That's a little less than twice as long as Iron Gwazi, and that's not even because of pacing issues, because Steel Vengeance has no pacing issues. I don't understand where that idea came from. To be honest, there's not a whole lot to say about Steel Vengeance that you haven't heard a million times, but it does everything I like amazingly, hence why it's far and away my number 1 coaster. In the end, you guys should not take this list too seriously, it's just my opinion and I would love to hear yours. So drop your top 10 or maybe top 5 or maybe even just top 1 down in the comments below and I will get to each and every comment. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button. At the time of recording, we are just 54 subs away from 1,000 subscribers and I'm hoping to reach 1K by the end of the year. Make sure to also check out my previous video to know what I'm doing to celebrate 1,000. Anyways, remember to leave any suggestions, thoughts, or video ideas in the comments below. And I'll catch you guys later. See ya.